Hello, friends. My name is Nate Jones. For those of you who do not know me, I want to continue the story of Mrs. Carante and I and the house that, my first house that I purchased through her. No sooner than I had purchased the house from her, she called me and told me she wanted to see me about the house. So, of course, I promptly went to her place and sat down and discussed with her what she thought that I should do with the house. Now, remember, this is a tiny Filipino lady. She said, Nate, I want you to sell the house. And I just looked at Mrs. Carante in the most peculiar ways. I mean, I just bought that house and I like that house. It's a nice family house. She said, no, I want you to sell the house and I want you to live in it. You could still live in the house. And instead of you paying $700 a month for your mortgage payment, tell the owner that you're willing to stay in the house and pay him $300 a month. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How can I sell the house, stay in the house, and slice my payments from $700 plus to $300 a month? Who in their right mind would do that? That's what I was thinking to myself. She, almost reading my mind, said, no, Nate, that's not what I'm talking about. You have students living in the house. I said, yeah. She said, and how much are your students paying you? I said, roughly about $300 a month. She said, okay. She said, what if you sold the house for the equity of thus and so, and then you tell the landlord, the new landlord, that if he let you live in the house, he can put an additional room downstairs and get 2 more students, which means that he would have 6 students living in the house, paying him $300 a month, plus your $300, and you would be the caretaker over the house, meaning that you would oversee all the students and you would make sure that the house is kept and you still get to live there for $300 a month. I was like, wow, this woman is off the chain. So I went out and I found somebody and he said, yeah, that's a smart idea. So I worked up the arrangement. She said, you can have a good Christmas with that money. And sure enough, I was able to have a good Christmas with that money with my family, and we embarked on the journey to keep the house. And I had students living in the house. And when the man that I had sold the house to was building the downstairs extra room for the extra students, Miss Carante died. He knew that I was getting all my information from her. And now that she is no more, he didn't feel confident that I was able to take care of everything and so on and so forth. Besides, he wanted in with Mrs. Carante, and he thought that by doing for me what he did for me, that he can also ride shotgun with her on account of me. But to make a long story short, she died, and while he was doing the downstairs renovations, on my desk was the lease that I had made and that he had drawn up with my signature on it for tenancy in the house. He stole the lease agreement and sent me a letter in the mail telling me to vacate the premises. Of course, I thought it was a joke. And I went to find my lease agreement, and to my amazement and surprise, it wasn't there. So I was shocked, to say the least. But I was more so shocked that he would treat me in such a vile manner. After all, we were friends. At least I thought we were friends. But I guess his take is that, look, if it's got 6 students downstairs and there are 3 bedrooms, what's to stop him from having 6 students upstairs? And rather than just having me have the 300 as a caretaker, he don't need me as a caretaker. He can find students himself. How hard could it be? So he gave me 2 weeks to vacate the premises. Of course, 2 weeks is no real time for anybody to talk about they're going to vacate. And it just so happened that the 2 weeks was like toward the end of the month. And so he wanted the following month to be free so he can take over the house and do his thing. Of course, I prayed about it. My wife was livid. She was upset, and rightfully so. My God is so big, so strong, and so mighty. There's nothing my God cannot do for me. Took it to God in prayer. Told him what was going on and what was happening, and just left it in his hands. God is so awesome to Nate Jones. Trust me. I left it alone. My wife wanted me to go and talk with John, but I didn't want to go talk with John. I mean, John, he had already done so much for me, and, John is not my God. You understand? So I talked to God about it and left it with God. A week went past, and I didn't have no idea of what I was going to do or where I was going to go. And the students were up in arms that were in my care because they was like wondering what were they going to do, So everybody was up in arms, but I just relied heavily upon God and just went about my duties. As another week was approaching to making it the second week, which is the time that we should have been vacating the premises, I can see this guy's truck driving in the neighborhood, circling as it were to see if there was any type of movement on our part in terms of getting out. I saw him and recognized what he was trying to do, trying to see and ascertain and blah, blah, blah. My wife was, what are we going to do? And I told her, we're going to trust God. And she was like, and I was like, "2 days before we supposed to vacate the premises, John came to my house. I said, hey, John. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, well, we got a small problem. He's like, oh, really? It's like, yeah, but I didn't really want to come to you about this problem because, I didn't really want to, get you involved and, cause a scene or anything like that. But he said, well, what seems to be the problem? And so I told him what was going on. He looked at me with that gleam in his eye that he always had. And he said, oh, okay. He said, well, I know you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, oh, no, John, what did you do now? what did you do, John? It's like he smiled. He said, I just purchased the house. I said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, I purchased it in this neighborhood. I said, John, you have a house that you purchased in this neighborhood? He said, yeah. He says, and it's vacant. I said, really? He said, would you like for me to show it to you? I said, yeah. He said, come on. Just walking distance, just across the street. We ran about 2 houses up the street, across the street. My name is Nate Jones, and I am flat-foot telling you that the house that John had purchased had the same floor plan of the house that I'm now living in. Room for room, staircase for staircase, bedroom for bedroom, kitchen for kitchen. The very exact same floor plan. Except John's house had a 2-car garage. Mine had a carport. John said, if you want to, the lights are on. You can move in. You can move in today if you want to. I went to my wife, and my wife said, shut your mouth. I said, no. I took my wife over to see the house, and she took some students with her to see the house, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. We took everything from the house that we were in, moved it to its own place, exactly the spot where it would have been in the other house, so that in less than an hour or so, we went from one house to the other, making the house vacant as if it was a ghost town, like as if magic, you know. 1 minute the lights was on, the next minute everything was in darkness and there was nothing there. So that when the man came to look at the house, because he didn't think that we could move in such a short space of time, because he had just circled a day or two before and we were still there. So that when he came again and found the house completely empty, I think even he was shocked. But we were gone. Not only were we gone, but the students had also left because they could continue their rooms in the other house. When I left the house, I left the problem and I left the situation and never thought about it again until several years later. I was talking with John and he said, do you know what happened to that house? I said, no, what happened to it, John? He said, when the man came back to take over the house, he had done all the renovations that he wanted for the house, but he couldn't find students to go in the house. And as a result of not being able to get students to go in the house, he had to pay $700 plus in mortgage payments, plus the added expenses of the renovations of the house. To finally, he decided that he would rent it to a family, and that family wasn't willing to pay $700 plus a month, so he had to reduce the amount he was asking for the rent. And of course, when the people moved in, they became delinquent in their payments. In other words, they didn't pay him. So he asked them to leave, and they wouldn't leave. So finally, he had to get a court order to make them leave. And when he got the court order to make them leave, they simply set it afire and burnt it down. And because he didn't have fire insurance, John said he had to build everything back from his pocket. He finally sold the house to one of his family members, and they too had a fire. And they had to move out. He said that house still vacant. Fire damage is still in the house. When I looked at the house and I listened to what John was telling me, I really couldn't believe my ears. Several years after that, I went by to see John, and the house was still vacant, and fire damage was still there. Can you imagine that story? What I'm going to do is I'm going to, from time to time, just give you story after story after story of this amazing God that I serve. This God is not just real. But he's delicious in his care. Now, of course, he gets offended with me from time to time, and rightfully so. And he chastises me when I need it. Because I am a bushman, and sometimes I don't think about stuff before I do it. I just do it, and after, it's not good. God is good to Nate Jones. When I think back on John, just a sweet, unassuming soul, but very, very wise and knowledgeable about so much stuff. So many things he's knowledgeable. I remember when I was struggling with my Greek in Oakwood College at the time, and I saw John and told John that I was struggling with my Greek. He says, I know Greek very well. I said, John, what is it that you don't know? And he just smiled. But when I think back on that guy, wow, he was such an amazing, amazing person. Very quiet, very knowledgeable. And guess what his church was? Non-denominational church. But that's just how God is, isn't it? Yeah? My name is Nate Jones. May you learn to make contact with such a God as I have. And in contacting him, may you learn to love him in such a way that you will find him to be so strong, so mighty. With nothing he won't do for you.